各位观众朋友们，大家好，欢迎收看 JxJ 论坛，由我 Jimmy 万马健，由我们的好朋友 Jim Noteware 为我们去讨论这个礼拜的时事。Jim, how are you?
Hello, Jimmy. I'm doing fine. Doing fine.
Last week was such a good conversation that really gave us a lot of insight on how to deal with stress, how to live the life that we deserve. So this week, I would love to continue that, but I feel like there's so many things in the world that me and you are concerned of that we talk about that we have to share, that we should share with the audience.
Yeah.
Like you said, we have inflation and economics, international issues between China, Taiwan, US. But then domestically, like you said, we have elections coming up with abortion issue, gay rights, gun control. You'd be surprised. Our Chinese audience actually are interested in domestic issues because
U.S. domestic issues.
Okay. Yeah, because they look at U.S. as a way either to make them feel better about their system or make them feel worse. You could use it for either or, right, to suit your purpose.
Okay.
What is on your mind today or this week? That is it the subpoenas? Is it the Trump's files that he took? Is it the election? I mean, there's so much going on. What are you thinking, Jim?
Well, the very first thing is I just want to say very respectfully that Queen Elizabeth passed away just a few hours ago.
Yes, sir.
And my first response was how sad. She was an incredible leader for an incredibly long time, very, very consistent. One thing I've learned about anything in life, that when you're good at something, you have to be consistently good. Just being good sporadically is better than nothing. But she exemplified being good all the time. There's not much we can add. My first reaction was how sad, but then the more I thought about it, she lived a wonderful life, got to 96, and she went quickly. She was up and around as recently as 2 days ago when she welcomed the new prime minister into her office. It was a wonderful, beautiful picture that she had. So I think there's an awful lot that we can learn from her and about her. And the rest of the media all around the world are going to be focused on this to the exclusion of almost everything else for quite some time. And so there's not much else that we can add except our prayers are with her. And I think poor Prince Charles and the new Prime Minister Liz Truss are going to have a devil of a time resurrecting the British economy. It's in very, very tough shape.
My dear friend, thank you for bringing it up. She did so much being a woman for suffrage, for going through guiding through the World War, the Cold War. She ruled with the iron fist. She's the last true monarch. But Jim, now that she's passed, we pray our condolences to the royal family, to our British friends, because we know how much she means. But from history would judge, but history is also written by the victors. The Western viewpoint of Queen Elizabeth, us being educated in the West, will always view her in a different light. But for a lot of colonies, former colonies, a lot of people that were persecuted by the British Empire, they would feel this difference. And I'm very conflicted of this because in a way she left at the perfect timing and she lived a great life. You're right, she left. She went to heaven the perfect timing because there are some very ugly insiders because of the social media, because of these prohibition of coverage. Very, very ugly undertones are coming out, spilling the beans on Princess Diana, spilling the beans on how Meghan Markle was being treated, the underlying racism in Buckingham Palace. These are things that she doesn't want to deal with. These are things that she's 96, We always tell our elderly too. I always explain it this way. the way our elderly grew up, they were educated and their mind is set in a certain way. We can't really, I don't want to hold them. It's not fair when they grew up thinking this is okay. Does that make sense? Because it's commonly accepted at the time. For example, if you grew up during, in the 70s or the 50s, look at what happens now socially, how much has changed. So for Queen Elizabeth, I can't expect her to keep up with the times. So I can understand who she's coming from, but there are a lot of things that are not acceptable in 2022 that would be accepted in her heyday. So it was a good time, and maybe they can move, the British royal family can move forward, and because they are on the taxpayers' dime, they are being supported by the country and by right. So there's certain accountability and responsibility they have for their society, in a larger sense for the Western media, all of Western world, because the Brits are U.S. and United States and United Kingdom are the two, whether it's cultural influence or social influence, they're still leading the West. Does that you see what I mean? Do you understand where I'm coming from? This other viewpoint of how we view her in history.
Yeah. What one of your points was, and I think we have to be really careful to look back in time and judge what happened at some former point in time by the standards we have today. I don't think is a valid thing to do. I think you have to look at it within the context of what was appropriate at the time.
True.
And understand history. And if you look at the difference in attitudes during those two different points of time, you can look at either progress up or deterioration, and then make a judgment about what has gone wrong and what have been the influences to bring us from the past to the current, let alone extrapolate us to the future. So, you can talk about the British Empire. The Queen, as old as she was too young to really have had very much influence on the creation of the British Empire. In fact, one of I think the sad parts of her life is she had to preside over the shrinkage of some of the British Empire, giving away Hong Kong, for instance. Think of how Hong Kong's destiny might be different if it were still under British rule.
Whoa, Jim! This is the serendipity of how me and use whatever karma. For you to bring this up, I literally just had a very deep conversation a few days ago regarding this. Let me be very frank. Well, you know what? I'm just going to tell you. What you just said would create so much controversy amongst Asians, not just Chinese Asians, because this is the narrative that's been led by the media. Hong Kong will never be better under British rule. This is not about communist China, Jim. We want to manipulate Hong Kong people to make them think that they were British citizens. They're not. They were being colonized. China was invaded, taken advantage by the Western powers. They forced them to give up this land. This is pure aggression and invasion. And then they colonized Hong Kongers. Hong Kongers never have voting rights. They didn't have freedom or democracy. They didn't get to pick who the British ruler was. They didn't have any justice. Hong Kong was full. Wow. I used to believe that too. God, I miss Hong Kong during British rule, Taiwan during Japan rule, Macau during Portugal rule, Vietnam during French rule. This kind of Western colonization mindset, this privilege is very dangerous, very, very dangerous, because it elicits a lot of hatred. What the British did in Hong Kong, the Hong Kongers didn't have a choice. Their country lost the war. Jim, in absolutely no terms do I have to tell you, British did not treat Hong Kong better during their rule. They did not get democracy. They didn't get to vote. They were second-class citizens. They were very colonized. So never, ever be led to think that they will be better off under British rule. If you look at pure economic data, look at the numbers of per household income, Hong Kong did have more autonomy after 1997. That's 25 years ago. The last few years, this new generation is being funded. This is not a conspiracy. The CIA, Brits, of course, we want to have influence other countries. We need to incite wars in order to fund our military industrial complex. It helps us. In the Middle East, we had, 100 years of war, but now it's done. We got Afghanistan. We're done over there. We need to create something. We had Vietnam War. We crashed Japan's economy in the early 90s. We're doing the same thing now. So don't buy into narrative, please, because that's what they're doing everywhere. This revisionist theory is really, really dangerous. Hong Kongers were not better under British rule, period. They were invaded and taken as war. This is a war crime. I mean, they didn't get a choice and say, hey, I voted for British to rule. No, it didn't happen that way, please. It is very discouraging when we hear this because it's dangerous. And so what the Brits did during this time is squeeze and pillage and steal as much historical artifacts. They're returning some of the stuff now to all over the world. What they did in Africa and Middle East, as Americans, we cannot have best of both worlds. We cannot sit and say democracy and the Western way and people first and God, country. We cannot keep saying that. Well, then that other faith turn around and dismiss what the colonists, the invaders, what the crusaders have been doing by invading and ruling and pillaging. It doesn't work that way. You cannot be both. It's either, hey, we want to give you out democracy and we hope you have self-rule, instead of, hey, let us rule you, but you're a second-class citizen, because that's what they were. I mean, I keep repeating that. It doesn't work that way. And it makes me very worked up because there's younger people in Hong Kong and Taiwan, they believe this, Jim. They have the same rhetoric as you. It is very dangerous because there's law and order, right? You're living in a country where you're ruled by somebody else. They have laws and order. You cannot sit there and have revolution saying that I'd rather be under British rule when you never had a choice. The Brits they didn't give you a choice either. Does that make sense, Jim? You're like, what?
No, frankly, it does not make sense. I stand by my thought. Hong Kong, for all of my life, was one of the top 4 tigers of Asia that grew in prosperity faster than anything historically. Yes, maybe some Hong Kongers didn't have rights within the British system.
Not some, all Hong Kongers have no rights.
No one could argue the prosperity and the freedoms that people in Hong Kong enjoyed, at least during my life.
They didn't have any freedoms in Hong Kong. I apologize. They don't.
Okay.
Because they cannot vote for you cannot vote for your official.
If that's the case, Jimmy, why are so many people in Hong Kong oppressed now with the suppression of the CCP over Hong Kong?
Sir.
The CCP is taking away a great number of freedoms and economic prosperity and linkages to the West that Hong Kongers enjoyed for a very long time.
Let's be clear on this, okay? Let's say if it's not a communist China right now, will we say the same thing? Hong Kong was lost during a war. The agreement was to return them in 1997 to China. Nobody who ruled China. It was returned. You're telling me now that we cannot follow the laws of the country that you live in. So you're telling me I don't agree with what DC is saying. So now I denounce the right as American citizen. I'm going to have open revolution. I'm going to burn police cars, kill police officers, and say because I'd rather be under Mexican rule because Texas used to be under Mexican rule.
I'm not saying any of that. The agreement was that Hong Kong or that the British rule in 1997 would be turned over, and the British left according to the agreement.
Jim,
I just said, imagine what would happen or have happened over the last 25 years had the British rule continued.
Hong Kong economy kept getting better under Chinese rule. China propped Hong Kong. And let me be very clear, because this is part of the history that I'm very familiar with. My master's program was part of this Hong Kong prospered before British rule because it was an open port. China gave us special tax privileges. Okay. There were many. Macau was taken by Portugal, Taiwan by Japan. Shanghai was split up, Zujie with 5. China's history, because of the Qing dynasty's corruption, this is a big pie that everybody's taking a piece of. Please don't have revision history and act as if the West did this as a favor for Hong Kongers. Hong Kongers did not enjoy any freedom when China came. We can blame CCP all we want, which I agree with their tactics is wrong. But they're not taking away rights. And if they're not enforcing what their law and order is, you cannot have open revolution saying they'd rather have British rule because you're not under British rule. And very importantly, you cannot just say they left. What they stay behind us is this constant need to still have influence. US wants influence there too. Do you really think that we're not manipulating the media or buying off? Come on, we're not naive. I see this in Taiwan every day. We see this in all over the world, what we do. This is what we do. Let's admit that. This is what the US do, right? Mm-hmm. We create havoc. That way we can stay on top. There's nothing wrong with that. Every country has to do what's best for them. We have hawks, we have doves. Don't sit there and say, we're doing this for the pure benefit of the Hong Kongers. They're so great, and I wish we could help them go back to the democracy and freedom they enjoyed before. That is a lie. They did not have more freedom and democracy before. Because they were colonized.
Okay, officially maybe so. You think
but that is what happened.
You think Jimmy Lai would be in jail today if the British were still there?
The fact you bring him just from Jimmy Lai, Jim, you really know what's going on.
All I'm doing is observing what I've seen with my own eyes, my own trips, my own communication during my life.
You know your stuff, Jim. You know what? Now you got me stuck. You're right. You cannot jail descendants and media leaders. You know what? To the Chinese, Jimmy Lai is a abolitionist. He's the Capitol riots, the people that are being sentenced in jail. Jimmy Lai is the same, right? They're insurrectionists. If in the United States people could be jailed because they believe Trump is their president, Jimmy Lai believes CCP is bad and he wants to have more power, and he's being jailed for it.
Well, look, I'm also a student of Israeli history, and one of my heroes in life is Menachem Begin. The British hated him. The British called him a terrorist. The Israelis called him a freedom fighter.
A hero, war hero. But what does the Palestinians think?
So what's the truth?
Perspective.
I think both are the truth, depending on your perspective.
Jim, as a Chinese American, even though I'm not from China or Hong Kong, even though I have friends that are from Hong Kong, they're also divided down to the half. Half believes exactly what you're saying. Other half wants stability and growth and no protest and no backwards economy, right? What are you trading off?
What am I what?
They're trying to say, are you trading off some personal freedom and media liberty in order for growth?
And let me give you two other examples. Yugoslavia under Marshal Tito from the end of World War II until the Soviet Union collapsed. Okay, all of the Balkan states were ruled with an iron fist by Mr. Tito. And when he passed away, everything went crazy. There were a lot of intramural wars and difficulties, including the one that we got engaged in the late 90s. Okay, it was a mess. But if you go over there today, my daughter happens to be in Croatia right now.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah, lucky. Beautiful. Yeah, it's one of the world's most attractive tourism spots.
It's flourishing. Yes, it's beautiful.
Yes. So my point is things change. The other thing is, look what happened in Iraq. Saddam Hussein was a very ugly dictator. We Americans didn't like him at all. So we removed him and the place came apart all over again. So while he was there, many people had a happier life because at least the place was safe and secure. They may not have had any rights, and maybe the minorities were persecuted or gassed. for the main middle class, the Ba'athist party members, they got along reasonably well. Okay, so it comes off.
But yet we cannot agree with that. For me, I'm like, what? Iraq people were oppressed. Saddam was a dictator. We should have removed him. But in hindsight, at that time, it was unanimous, right?
Right. Well, we were also fed a whole bunch of erroneous information. Okay,
by the Bush administration.
Yes, it was terrible.
Jim.
So I think we have to kind of stand back and look at all of the flurry of information that flies around in all different directions every minute of every day, and try to make sense of it the best we can. And it's not always easy. And you talk about revisionist history. Points of view of history change over time as well. So I'm sorry I opened Pandora's box here, but
no, you didn't.
I just thought that Hong Kong, and I still think Hong Kong would be better, or the people in Hong Kong today would be better off if the British were still there.
No,
I don't say the same thing about the people in India. I'm very much a student of partition too, of what happened there in the late 40s. So lots of things change.
You know what? You're entitled to your opinion because you've been there. But I have to vehemently protest because I really do. Because this is a subject that I'm very familiar with.
But
it's a shame what we're doing in Hong Kong. Steering the pot, what we're doing in Taiwan and Hong Kong is very, very. It's the same thing we've always done. But look, like you said, Jim, it's beneficial to us and our economy.
Yeah, well,
because now over $1 billion sale to Taiwan on some used military products to pretend that we could fight China on our own. Taiwan cannot fight China. We still don't want to sell our friends out there in the Baltic states. Are we still selling them weapons? Zelensky, you see, he's still pleading. We're still not selling to him. We want them to have revolution against KGB and Russia, but then we don't want to help them to have a real war. Same thing with Taiwan. We sold them $1 billion worth of crap, but are we going to really give them weapons so they can fight? We won't. We want to maintain this chess match to maintain our influence, and that's fine in the name of democracy and freedom. Our system will not work in Iraq. Our system doesn't work in China. That's a fact. We went through trial and errors to get to this democracy today.
I've never suggested anything else. And I think the future of Taiwan is going to depend upon the actions and preferences of the people in Taiwan. Maybe America can help them, but it's up to them.
Jim, once again, we've talked this many times, and you know the same conversation you brought up about Hong Kong I just had 2 days ago with someone that is also very pro-Taiwan. And this is what I told him, okay, about Taiwan also. Jim, you could want to oppose communism. You could want to have freedom, which Taiwan enjoys.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean you could use politics because it benefits you right now and deny your heritage and culture. In Vietnam, no matter how much you hate the communist Vietnamese, you're still Vietnamese. You cannot suddenly say, you know what, I'm not Vietnamese, I'm French. You know what, I don't want to be Vietnamese anymore because I don't like communist Vietnamese. I'm going to be Cambodian. In Korea, no South Korean would say, you know what, they all hate North Korea, but they will never say they're not Korean. In Taiwan, we're doing ethnic cleansing. What the West is doing is teaching them, you're not Taiwanese. You all came from China 50 years ago, 80 years ago, but you're not Chinese, you're Taiwanese. But there's no country as Taiwan. It fits the benefit, the narrative. It doesn't work that way. There's no country of Hong Kong, my friend. Hong Kong has been a port. You're a Cantonese. There's no country of Hong Kong. You cannot be Hong Kongness. You know, you cannot use race and deny and change history to fit the political narrative. This is ethnic cleansing.
Well, okay.
That's what they're doing. Okay, you know what? You're like, whatever. Look, Jim.
I mean, yeah.
But that's what they're doing there, Jim. And the West doesn't talk about it. That's exactly what's going on.
I mean, you know, look, you say, yeah, I don't like communism. If people in China want to be ruled by the CCP, that's up to them. What bothers me is when they start stretching their limits and try to force their will on other people.
But Hong Kong and Taiwan is part of China for 5,000 years. Because of World War II, the Qing Dynasty was weak. The Western powers came and divvied it up. It doesn't work like this. We cannot.
I thought everybody agreed during the Nixon administration, including Deng Xiaoping, that one country, two systems. So
Well, that's what they're doing now, right? It's one country, two systems. It's still their country. Who are we to interfere in their domestic policies? That's what concerns me. Why are we? China did not send any battleships to the Gulf of Mexico or Western. We sent it to them. They're not the ones that are sending military to South America or Canada. We are sending it there.
You think that international commerce would be better off without the U.S. Navy?
Of course not. Of course not.
Okay, come on.
Of course
you
not.
think we're there for our own benefit? We're there to keep international commerce.
Which is to our benefit. It is to our benefit. Absolutely.
Well, sure, because we're the biggest trading country in the world. And by the way, China is the second biggest. So we both work out.
And can we just admit that our military is so complicated?
So does Korea.
Okay. But Jim,
what?
We cannot just walk around and talk about democracy and our culture, American movies. We have a big stick behind it. That's our military might. We always will have that. But all I'm saying is that let's admit that our foreign policy for the last 72 years since World War II, 73 years, has always been to benefit us. It's not to benefit Iraq.
No.
We do not benefit Afghanistan. We do not benefit Vietnam or Japan. We do not benefit Taiwan. There's nothing wrong with that. Just admit it. What we're doing is what's right for our country. Can we admit that? Let's not put it under the guise of we're helping these people.
Well,
we're not helping anyone. We're benefiting us.
Okay.
Sorry,
look at the history of China since World War II or since 1949. Has the U.S. benefited by its relationship with China? Yes, it has. Has China benefited through its relationship with the United States? Absolutely. Okay. On a relative basis, who's been the bigger beneficiary? I think everyone would say the bigger beneficiary is China. Okay. So we should just keep that going. If it makes sense to trade with each other, we should continue to trade with each other. If they want to be communists, fine. And if many Chinese people want to come to the United States and they want to come legally, we should welcome them. Our country here in the United States is much better off because of the immigration that we've enjoyed from Chinese people, their entrepreneurial spirit, their cultural values. All those things have made
absolutely
our country bigger and
we're
stronger.
A melting pot. Yeah. We attract top talent from all over the world. That's what makes
right now my own view is we should be welcoming people from Ukraine in. We should be welcoming people from Afghanistan in through legal channels, proper vetting, all of those things, and we will all continue to be better off.
Thank you, Jim. That is something I can agree on. We take people from around the world that are refugees that are in need. They came from oppressive governments and they appreciate this country more. There's no doubt about that.
We've been doing that. We've been doing that for 250 years.
Yes, but Jim, remember, it's parallel. It's not one or the other. We could do that. But at the same time, we're also creating conflict in faraway land because it does benefit us. It's both. We could do both. Because, I mean, there's no absolutes, right? There's no way this government could be only good. We made a lot of mistakes. I think it's a mistake what we're doing in Taiwan and China. Because China is doing what they need to do for their benefit, but we're the ones that suddenly treat them like enemy because it's convenient. Since Trump dumping on China is convenient, blame another country because the Cold War is done, right? And Middle East wars are done. We have to have a new conflict. But anyways, look, I do agree with everything you said, at least regarding of how we are a safe haven, and we do want the world to be at peace, but in order. And that order is created by us. Russia doesn't agree. China doesn't agree. Cuba.
Fine, let them be their own. But Russia comes into Ukraine. That's a different story. Okay.
Yes. Jim, we could talk about this for hours and days, but about Hong Kong and Taiwan.
As long as we're agreeing on something, it's probably a good place to leave it for this.
That's right. We agree to disagree. So I hope you have a great week. The weather has been good in Houston finally. Hope God's with you. Hope we have health, happiness, and family. And pray more, Jim. That's what I learned. I pray more.
Okay, good. And at least in the United States, we can disagree without shooting each other.
And you know what? And we could get to pray and believe in whatever God we believe in. We have that freedom. I agree. And we can say whatever we want on media. I never forgot that. I appreciate it. It doesn't mean that, well, we'll save it for the day. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, Jimmy, thank you. Next week. Bye-bye.
Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.